Oh, wow. Oh, right. Okay.
And now we
Yeah.
behave properly. Phil,
Yes.
over to you.
Yes. Thank you. So, yeah. So, work with Pixel International, but also Apprenda, which does the same work. Pixel mainly is just in government schools, whereas Apprenda we work in NGO schools and in support schools, in formal education in the Middle East, etc., etc. All right. And I feel humbled by the company I find myself in, and a little bit like preaching to the choir, because I think what I'm going to share with you this morning, I think probably you are all across it. But I if I'm covering things that you think, yep, we do that, give yourselves a pat on the back. But hopefully it might trigger some interesting thoughts and discussions as well. So I'm gonna share a presentation with you. There's going to be opportunities through it to kind of hear what you're thinking, your observations, your any questions. Okay. I'm not the font of all knowledge, but I think collectively, I think we bring a really great breadth of experience and knowledge in the sectors that we work in. So I am going to share my screen. Right. Can you tell me if you can see that okay?
Yep, all good.
Great. Okay. So gonna start off with kind of how we arrived at where we've arrived. We all, don't we? We all run training sessions with different teams and with different individuals across the world in the developing world. And I know personally some of you with what you deliver as well, really excellent. But you'll all have the experience of effectively training is easy. All right. We can all deliver, I think, probably really good quality training, which is well received. People are excited by it, etc. And this goes for schools in the UK as well. But then there's a gap, isn't there, between the training and actually putting the training into practice. And there's all sorts of obstacles that kind of get in the way of an organization, a team, a leader putting that into action. So this is the sort of foundational thinking and strategy to help maximize that impact from training. And it's part one, because hopefully when we get to the end of today, you'll be like, right, that was really interesting. We'd love to hear part two, Phil. All right. So I'll wait your judgment. The sword of Damocles is hanging over me. All right. So where are we? So the first thing I want to declare is a bit of a kind of health warning on this, because we're going to get quite personal. And I'm actually not worried about that, because seeing who is on the call, I haven't got any concerns about that. But for some people, getting personal is a bit of a bridge too far. There are people that are very private individuals. They don't really like talking about themselves for all sorts of reasons. So I wanted just to declare that, but also that maybe some of what I cover might be a trigger for some of you with stuff that's happened earlier on in life. And if it gets too much, be at peace to dip out if you need to. All right. The idea is not to trigger, but sometimes these things do. But it's just acknowledging that, and that we don't want you to feel kind of embarrassed by that at all. Okay. So putting training into practice. Okay, this really is the holy grail of what we do, isn't it? All right. If only people would put into practice the training, it would make such a massive difference. So that's our real kind of holy grail. But actually, to put into practice is both simple and highly complex, because ultimately with training, what we're aiming for is a change in behavior. And when behavior changes, the impact changes. So in my context of working in schools, effectively, we were really looking for the behavior of teachers to change, the behavior of school leaders to change. Because if behavior doesn't change, there isn't a change in impact. And so actually, I think we are all in the business of promoting behavior change. And behavior change is really complicated and really difficult. But it's also an area that there's clear interest in. If you Google self-help, it's now a massive industry. You might see on TikTok and Instagram a lot of posts coming up for coaching, for life coaching, for organizational coaching, for therapy. So it's really sort of tapping into a space where more and more people are waking up to this. So to put that training into practice, that's built on good quality training. We need to help people with their behavior change. And that relies on us as a training organization really knowing the context that we're operating in, and particularly the culture that we're operating in. And again, you guys, you're all over that. So that's not an issue. But for other organizations, that could well be an issue. All right. So the quality of training is really important, because if you're going to put that into practice, if we've got bad quality or poor quality, we don't want poor quality being put into practice. So quality of training, context, and culture is important. But in order to actually have that built on something, in all of the organizations that we support, there will be a team. All right, it could be a team that runs the NGO. It could be a sub team that operates in particular regions in the country that you operate in. It could be within the school. There's a school leader, and sometimes there's a kind of leadership team that work with that. Some organizations bring head teachers together from the schools that they support, and so that forms a team. And what we found over the years is that you can have really good quality training matched to context with good understanding of culture, good building of relationship. But when it comes to putting stuff into practice, there are some big barriers with that. And one of the big barriers that we've come across is team dysfunction, all right, or team unhealth, all right? And this is not rocket science. We can all relate to that. If you've got dodgy things happening within a team or interpersonal relationships in a team, that is going to have a massive impact on the outworking of that training. All right. I think back to schools that I've worked in the UK, and you can all relate to this. In a team, there's a kind of public side of the team when you meet, and then there's all the stuff that happens behind closed doors and in whispered conversations in corridors, and sometimes quite a lot of nastiness that happens. All right. And all of that has a massive impact on putting the training into practice, which ultimately is having an impact on those children that we're wanting to support in their one chance to make it in life. And so I think this is a really important subject. All right. And of course, you know, psychology 101, you'll straight away understand the meaning of the iceberg. Yeah, what you see, the behaviors that you see on the surface are an outworking of what's going on inside. All right. And what's going inside is, of course, hidden. And so many times we're dealing with outward behavior and we're tackling it as we see it. But you'll all have had experience where as you're tackling it, you become aware of, there's more going on than meets the eye. Incidentally, this goes for every relationship that we have in our professional life, in our private life, with our partners, with our kids. It's all the same. All right. And the challenge is that most of us do not want to expose what is beneath the surface. And that's got some major, major ramifications. So, first question, what do you think are the signs of poor team health? And you might want to talk from experience. You can change the names to protect the innocent or the guilty. All right. I'm going to stop sharing because I really want to hear from you in terms of any, like if you all work with teams, what are the kind of real red flags that you see that is spelling poor team health?
I think one of the biggest things for me is communication or lack of communication, not being able to speak about, you don't need to know what's going on in your personal life necessarily, but if you're not telling me that you're struggling with a certain assignment, template, something, then how are we to know? And that creates that larger iceberg.
Yeah. So Claire, how does that manifest, that communication issue? What are the telltale signs of that?
I think it's the tell signs, I think, are unfortunately when it's too late, when you find out, oh, why didn't you just say that? I could have got that for you, but you've kept silent because you felt like you couldn't say anything. And now we're in a worse case because we could have dealt with this beforehand. Yes. So it's almost like it's signs are too late yes. before that comes up.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm going to go for sickness, increased sickness days, because people just either can't be asked to come to work, or they're exhausted from overwork. So I'd put that in the mix.
Yeah.
I think linking into Claire's point, one of the challenges that we've had is that our team in Tanzania will often tell us what they think we want to hear, rather than being, and it's only when we're over there and actually sitting with them in meetings that you get more of a sense of what the reality is. So we've had people that have been struggling with particular roles as the organization's grown, but continue to tell us, they're still communicating with us, but telling us that everything's fine and yes, it's okay. And it's only when you dig deeper that you realize that there's some problems there.
Yeah, thanks, Teresa. And yeah, we've been there, haven't we? And Caroline on the chat is saying an inability to resolve discussions on policy, approaches, etc. Different team members keep raising roadblocks. We've all been there, haven't we? To senior managers rather than discussions within the team meetings. All right. And absolutely classic team dysfunction is the leader proposes an idea. Everyone says, what a great idea. Yes, wonderful. And then they walk out of the meeting saying to their mate, that will never work.
And
they've not.
I'm nodding my head at all of these things, but then turning it round, looking at dysfunction on the part of leadership as well, is leadership not listening, leadership, and I'm thinking about myself here, leadership seeing things going in the wrong direction, but not stepping in the right way at the right time.
Yeah, I can echo that, Margaret. I mean, I spent last year basically saying no to everything because I just couldn't handle any more questions. So my team would be like, "What about this?" And I'd be like, "Nope, can't do it." And it was just overwhelm of my own dysfunction of trying to lead a team and not being able to do it.
Yeah, thanks. And Margaret and Claire, I think probably all of us can echo that as well. All right. And of course, the lead is part of the team. So dysfunctional leadership will generate dysfunctional teams as well. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else before we move on? Okay. So.
Sorry, I'm just absent leadership, Julian. I've got a situation where one of my colleagues is just absent, and therefore we work around him to get things done, and then he feels that he's not informed, he doesn't know what's going on, and it just makes the whole problem worse and worse and worse.
Right. Oh, joy. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I add one more?
Yes, Harriet, please.
On leadership, I think like under, what's the word? Is it over or under? Overstepping the leadership. I've not used the right phrase, but when a leader tells someone in the team to do something and they don't like it, and instead of telling the leader, they go above and they go to like the next level up, which is often me, and they'll come to me and say, "I don't like this thing that my manager's told me to do." And to me, that seems a bit dysfunctional, that obviously something's not working right in the team. If you can't tell your manager that you don't like it, you have to go to the more senior person. That seems a bit, things aren't quite right.
Yeah, again, I think we've probably all been there, Harriet. Yeah, it's really, really frustrating. And Elle has just said, people in a team who no longer bring value, but you feel loyalty and personal affection for. Oh gosh, yes. That is such a common one, because particularly in the kind of fields that we all work in, there is a crossover between professional working and personal friendship. They become friends, and it's much, much harder to then deal with someone who's not doing what they're meant to do, or etc., because they're a mate, they're a friend. So that's a really, really hard one. So let's have a look. Here, this is from a report from Forbes. Let's see how many we got. All right. And it's not a competition. Okay. So right. So communication breakdown, absence of trust, unresolved conflict. There's an interesting one. Exodus of talent. So basically, team members who are in a team that feel they've got a lot of contribution to share, they will be aware of the team unhealth, dysfunction, and they get to a stage where it's never going to work here, I'm going. And that's really, really sad. Sulking, withdrawal. Okay, yeah, everything's fine. Groupthink. All right, I'm just going to say what everyone else is saying because I want an easy life. Lack of decision making, just talking around in circles because no one wants to take responsibility. Yeah, and blame. When stuff goes wrong, you might have been the team that agreed it, but it's the team leader's fault. All right. So lots and lots of stuff there with regards to poor team health. And my friends, the impact of that can be really catastrophic, particularly to the young people and children that are our ultimate beneficiaries. All right. And so it's one of these horrible, horrible issues that we don't want to tackle, but we have to tackle. And often there's not an easy way through it, and it's painful. So here's a statement. There will never be effective team health if the individuals in the team are unhealthy. All right. And again, we've done a lot of training on team health, but the more we did that, the more we really drilled down into individual health. So underneath team health, I'm calling it awakeness. And I don't mean woke. Okay? All right. So please dispel any initial triggers with wokeness. All right. I'm not meaning that. I'm meaning people who are awake to themselves, aware of what is going on inside of them. And you would think that would be totally obvious, but it's not. And the challenge is this: the tragedy of the unexamined life, that many of us go through life asleep to ourselves, asleep to our behavior, asleep to what triggers us. And so our behavior, because our behavior is a result of our emotions and feelings that are a result of what's going on inside, which are the underneath of that iceberg, remain unexamined, unchallenged, and you just get the collateral damage in the situations that you've all just shared. All right. We've found, and I found, that people who are deliberate about examining their life, and I'm not talking about navel gazing and like it's all about me, I think you know that, right? But people that tend to develop habits of reflection generally become more healthy individuals. All right. But we've got barriers that prevent us from self-examination. And one of them is the tyranny of the urgent. All right. When I'm speaking with head teachers around the world and ask them, in your diary, if you keep one, if you have one, when do you build in time in the week where you are not doing something, working your way through your to-do list, but you're in your office with the door closed, with your mobile phone away, and actually just reflecting on your week? What's gone well? Why did it go well? What's not gone well? How did I contribute to that? What was going on inside of me? And most heads will say words to the effect, I haven't got time for that, because everything is always urgent. And of course, if we don't kind of intervene on that vicious cycle, nothing will change. All right. So there's an intervention that's needed, a timeout to build into the week opportunities to reflect. So that's one of the challenges. Next is lack of knowledge, lack of understanding about mental health, lack of understanding about the interplay between needs met and unmet, between that and emotions and feelings, and between that and behaviors. And so a lot of it remains unconscious. So there is a need for some training in this area as well. Another one, growing up, all of us had parents or carers that imprinted a model of awakeness or asleepness on us. All right. So if, like in my home, lovely mum and dad, but a lot of unconscious behavior working out, never really talking about what's going on inside, never, and we talk about what we value, don't we? So if it's never talked about, it's not valued. And then into professional organizations. Margaret, we come back to leadership. Is the leader modeling unexamined life to his or her team? And normally the answer is they're not. So lack of role model. And then this is part of the health warning, particularly in the UK at the moment, kind of staff well-being is a real trigger for teachers, because often it's given lip service. The school puts on a yoga class every month, and that's like, all right, that's us doing well-being, while at the same time doubling the workload for their teachers. And so that kind of lazy, horrible approach to well-being has actually given, in the UK at least, well-being a bit of a bad rap. And what I find talking with colleagues is there's a bit of kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So we just need to be kind of conscious of that. So what I've just shared with you about the unexamined life, some of the reasons for that unexamined life. What are your thoughts? What are your observations? What questions does that generate in you?
A friend of mine has recently started something called the Conscious Cafe, which is a space where she tries to help people think about their conscious and unconscious biases and recognize where they come from so that they can start to deal with them.
Yeah.
And I found that a really interesting kind of avenue to go down, as to where do my biases come from, and how do I then tackle them.
Excellent. Thanks, Julian. Anyone else? How are you doing in terms of your examined life?
Well, it's really interesting. I keep coming back to something that was just weird, in that a history book that I had at school, the first person, you know how you write your name in the book?
Yeah.
Yeah. The first person who had that book was my dad, 30 years before.
Wow.
And it just made me think, okay, so, and his argument was that history doesn't change. And my argument was, yeah, but the perspective of history changes. And I'm being taught the same as you. Therefore, I'm not evolving or changing. And I'm being taught to be a replica of what has gone before. And actually, I need to change that. I need to recognize history from different perspectives, which was never available. So, I started thinking about what it all means in different ways.
Yeah. Thanks, Julian. Anyone else?
And I think there's a cultural aspect here reflected in what Julian's just said, that I think probably, I don't want to overstep, but probably most of us were brought up in the same kind of family that you've described, Phil, where we weren't encouraged to inspect our feelings and our thoughts. And if they were divergent, we would hide them rather than bring them out. And I think the same is probably true of the members of my team who come from a British culture, who are dealing with people from a completely different culture in South Africa, that frankly they know very little about. And there is a clash. There's a definite clash and lack of understanding between the cultures there, in terms of how much people are prepared to reveal of themselves. And then what Teresa was saying earlier about people agreeing, and this is very much I think part of African culture, that children are brought up to agree with their parents, not to argue with their parents, and put a point of view and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else? Yeah, so you know, the challenge is this, you know, we all work in different cultures, but what I've been sharing about, this is part of the human condition. There's cultures kind of filter it in different ways, but it's a truism in terms of our lives. All right. And I've had really interesting conversations with Tanzanians and Kenyans about this, and they agree. That like Margaret, they would be sort of saying the same thing, that our culture has not encouraged us to be open and to look inside, and so therefore history kind of repeats itself. Claire, can you just pause the recording a minute? Sharing that with you because from a personal perspective, I had 30+ years of an unexamined life with all sorts of collateral damage being caused by that. And so what I'm sharing with you today is not kind of academic pursuit, but something that's been intensely personal as well. So we're almost there, guys. All right. So this is some of the stuff that came up in my therapy, and I've used it with individual coaching that I do. Asking, and I start with school leaders or heads of organization, are you in touch with what you're feeling inside? So for example, during a meeting, if something's, you know, kicking off, you're getting that passive aggressive kind of thing, are you actually aware of what's happening inside? Do you actually go there during the meeting? Because if you don't, that iceberg's going to be operating. It's going to be triggering behavior in you in that meeting that in the cold light of day, you might have done it differently. So to be able to understand what you are feeling is really, really key. Also, and this was really big for me, are you in touch with your body? I wasn't in touch with my body. I had all that tension, I had all that tightness, but wasn't paying any attention to it. And so, you know, what is your physical body saying as you are approaching that difficult meeting? Are you tight across the chest? Have you got increased heart rate? Have you got sore shoulders, tightness? What's your body's giving you clues to what is happening inside? And so many of us ignore it, don't think about it, kind of nullify it. And it's really important. And then the other one, which is really, really important, are you able to rest, to take time out? And the killer, how are you with silence? Because most of us are not great with silence. And these days with, you know, the classic chief of distraction, no silence at all. My son plays on the PlayStation while watching a YouTube video, while listening to music. He's got 3 inputs all happening at the same time. I've no idea how he does it, but he's got a really big unexamined life, unfortunately, where it's kind of work in progress. But it's quite rare, particularly for school leaders, to have that times of silence, because it's in those times of silence that we are not distracted, that we are confronted with what's going on inside of us. But the pull of distraction, the temptation to run away from pain is huge. So I just want to encourage us into having periods of silence, not the telly on in the background, the radio on in the background, turn off the notifications and take time out, because that's really, really big. And beginning to work on these with what am I feeling inside? What is my body saying? And doing silence is the beginning of an examined life. And that's got massive health benefits. It's got massive organizational benefits. I think you probably do believe me, but I love this experiment. You could try it this week. Ask colleagues when they finished speaking with you about something, all right? How they feel. Yeah, right, so how do you feel about that? Notice if they answer with what they think, because that's what often happens. You ask people how they feel, and they don't tell you how they feel. They respond by telling you what they think. And they're two very, very different things. If they are telling you what they think, try and press them to name the feeling that they're experiencing and watch their facial expression and watch their body language. Now, generalization alert coming up, all right? Trying desperately to avoid stereotyping, but basically, in my experience, men are pretty hopeless at this, all right? My experience and talking with lots of people about this is you ladies are quite good at talking about your emotions and what's going on inside. With men, there's just a massive psychological barrier where once you finish talking about cars, football, and the news, the politics, to go deeper than that is actually really rare. All right. So we come back to Margaret's point. We have to model talking about stuff that's deeper, not just superficial stuff. All right. And you could try it with your partner. See what happens when they finish speaking with you about something, asking them how they feel. All right. When I started doing this, when people asked me how I felt, I would be completely stuck because I would be like, I think I feel, all right. And then anger is a real kind of coverall that's used as a, yeah, I feel angry, but anger covers a whole range of emotions. So like what bit of anger are you feeling? Is there a better word that you can say than anger? But when you start doing this, when you go there, because you're going beneath the surface on that iceberg, there will be resistance. And what I've found is that you especially get resistance from what I call the mavericks. The mavericks are the people on your team that are really good at what they do, but they are highly resistant to control. They push the boundaries. They often go out on a limb. It often works out fine, but they are highly resistant to any kind of responsibility, accountability within the team. And they really hate unexamined life because it really triggers something that's going on inside of them, because they're mavericks for a reason, and it's often not a great reason. It takes time to do this. Like I shared with you, working on unconscious patterns of behavior takes time. Guess what? It takes practice. It takes reflection and knowledge, but your health is worth it, and so is your team's. And we've got to start with us, and then we've got to help our leaders go there, because that is what is ultimately going to generate a healthy team. This is, I think, almost the last slide. There are some tools that I've used, that I've come across, that really, really have helped me on my journey. All right, and Harriet and Lorna, you'll be aware of this first one because I've shared this with you. If you've come across the Enneagram, it's a personality test. People have compared it to Myers-Briggs. I never got on with Myers-Briggs because I felt really kind of pigeonholed by it, and it was quite complex. The Enneagram is very much a journey into wholeness, a journey into awakening, recognizing that we've got repeat patterns of behavior that are aligned to a particular personality type. It's not like, you know, utopia, panacea, everything's brilliant, but I found it a really good tool that triggers and aids reflection. If you've come across this as well, MVC, it is absolutely fantastic. Non-violent communication. It doesn't mean like, let's not fight, okay? It's more about fighting cleanly, actually. But if you YouTube NVC, there's some fantastic stuff about there helping us explore feelings and needs. And there's really, really good resources out there on mindfulness if we just park our inner cynic on that. All right, so that's some tools that really have helped me on my journey as well. So we'll come back to kind of what you think about all that, but next time, if you have me back for part 2, and again, Harriet and Lorna, I think I want to go there with this book from a fantastic guy, Patrick Lencioni, on the 5 dysfunctions of a team. So that's hopefully where we're going to go next time. And Claire's saying the Cantor Institute is another good one to check out. Oh, I've not heard of that, Claire. Looking at your propensities way of working both personally and professionally. So we'll have a look at that. All right, so hopefully you've seen that we want training to be effective. There needs to be good training to actually make that happen, which sits on effective team health, but team health sits on us being awake to ourselves so that we're more able to challenge and change our behaviors to model that so that we get that across our organization and schools. There you go. Claire, I'm going to hand back to you, or Julia.
I have a quick question for you, actually, Phil. How do you suggest, or thoughts, feelings, emotions on taking on the emotions of other people? So it's one thing to say, how are you feeling about this? My natural reaction is to take on what they're feeling, and therefore it runs a runner on me, because then I either block it out, move on, or take it on physically, in which case I just get ill because this person is going through this, and there's this and that, and they've given me feedback on that, which is completely fair, but it then makes me feel this way, bringing on to their feelings. That would be my concern. I usually end our meetings with any more thoughts, feelings, or emotions. No one really takes me up on it. Yeah. But if they did, I know myself will take that on.
Right. Great question. So I think the part 2 is really going to help with that, Claire. All right. But what I would say is if you're a counsellor, all counsellors have a supervisor. And part of the role of that supervisor is that you absorb, if you're counselling, you're absorbing stuff, often not very nice stuff, and it needs an outlet. A great way of dealing with it is to talk it out. So Claire, my question to you, Teresa, you as well, is who do you talk to about this kind of stuff? And if you haven't got someone, have a think of who that could be. It's that whole kind of problem shared is problem halved type thing. But that's why counsellors have supervisors, to really talk out, this is what's happened and this is what I'm feeling. Right, so what are you going to do with that? All right. And so there's talking it out really helps, Claire. It's not going to solve it all, but then there's other techniques that are going to help address that. Like any thoughts, any feelings, no one really talking about that. I think our next session will really help with that as well.
I don't know how many people are working in conflict situations where there's a lot of it may be actually out in the open and an awful lot is underneath. So you've got political differences, racial differences, all sorts of things in society. And what I've found is, in myself, a reluctance to open up that bag of worms, and encourage people to let it out, because it might be so destructive. And maybe it's better to keep the lid on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Margaret, I work in those contexts as well, and I've had all those, yes, Pandora's box. Yes, absolutely. So, you'll understand we haven't been talking today about professional therapy and counseling and trauma care. That's a whole different area. And it kind of ties back to what Claire asked earlier as well, that for most people, when they're sharing their feelings, they're not asking you to fix it. They just want it acknowledged. All right. So you've probably all been on workshops about active listening, and about repeating back a summary of what they've just shared with you, because people want to be heard. People, if they're heard, they're valued. Their feelings and their emotions are validated by that, and they'll know that you're not there to fix kind of traumas from the war that they've just come out of, but to have it acknowledged and to feel compassion from who you're sharing it with, and empathy goes a long way. So the Pandora's box, it's a challenge, because kind of if you don't go there, you've just got history repeating itself and multiple collateral damage. So the trauma training that I've done is that a lot of people kind of share small things first. They want to kind of test to see, is this a safe place to share? And then there are resources out there, maybe Claire, Julian, I'm trying to remember in terms of have we done any of this on this network, but kind of trauma care, has that come up at all? Right, that would be a good session, wouldn't it? If we've got anyone who's a real specialist in that area to help us, Margaret, with that, dealing with Pandora. But as I said, the kind of 101 approach, I think, is the acknowledgement, the valuing. Brilliant. Thanks. Harriet's got contact. And the validation and the empathy with, thank you for sharing. Thanks, Lorna. Yeah, trauma care would be immensely. Yes, there is much hidden trauma in the team. What I shared with you was a form of trauma, and there's loads of it out there, but I think there's a way through it. Lorna, hello, you're on mute.
I know it was a bit loud here before, so I was keeping it on mute and off, but yeah, thanks. Yeah, they've hinted at it, I should say. It's like you said, you sort of sparked a memory when you said people will start off by saying something small just to test the water. So you get a hint of some of the terrible things they've maybe been through in the past. And then you start to understand why they sometimes behave the way they do. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Lorna.
Has anyone done there's a couple of them, but 5 exemplary leadership skills with their team? The Cantor Institute also has a different one, but it's basically 5, I can send it out later, 5 aspects of a leader, and which we all have bits and pieces of. So enabling others, caring for the heart, kind of being that opposition, challenging the process, modeling the way. One more, and I'll remember it in a bit. But as a team, what we do with our team is we place these around the room, and then you stand by the one that's you kind of relate to the most. And it's really interesting to see where your team is in that, particularly those that stand by challenging the process, because those are usually the ones that you're like, oh, shut up. but actually finding the value in that, because if you have
Yes.
nobody on your team that is challenging the process,
Yes.
you're all going to, you're basically hypothetically heading towards a cliff, and nobody's going to tell you what's on the other side of that.
Yeah.
That's really helped our team kind of redesign that challenging and being like, that's you,
Nice.
get it, but also
Yeah.
they're realizing what they are also being able to contribute in different areas, and
Yeah.
actually it's quite valid to
No.
have that annoying person.
Fantastic. And that whole people not speaking up is what Patrick Lencioni calls false harmony. I think we've probably all been in teams with a bit of that. Yeah. All right. So any other thoughts that folk want to share or comment? Maybe even how are you doing with your examined life? Can we get personal on here? All right. How's it going with, like, no judgment? Okay.
I'm doing quite a lot of it at the moment because me and Ezra, who you know, Phil, have been doing a coaching course. So we just finished a foundational course and we've just started the advanced course. It means you're practicing a lot on the other people, on or with the other people on the course. It does make you examine yourself quite a bit in the process. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Well
So it
done.
can be extremely challenging, extremely emotional.
Mhm.
Yeah. And you do want to run away from it sometimes.
Very true.
Yeah, I mean, there is a reluctance. Phil, you mentioned, trying to avoid pain. I've just been having some physiotherapy for my knee, and what I had been doing was avoiding the things that made my knee hurt. Now I'm having to do exercises that make my knee hurt, but they're going to get it better in the end. So that seems to be an analogy.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Margaret.
I think kind of going back to Claire's point, really, like Claire, I'm always I always look for what other people's pain is, and always keen to kind of, I think it's perhaps a bit of a distraction from my own. I don't look internally very easily, and I'm more keen to focus on what other people are going through and absorb that, and feel the need to kind of resolve that, as opposed to looking internally. So not necessarily based on any particular trauma, and really appreciate you sharing yours, Phil. But I'm conscious that occasionally I don't show stress, but I know that occasionally my body will tell me that we had a really difficult situation within the organisation last year, and it was only really when I started having heart palpitations and having to go to the doctors that I thought, actually, I'm not dealing with this particularly well. So haven't found the solution. But yeah, I'm conscious that I'm not very good at looking internally. I'm much better at looking at other people's.
Yeah. Right. Thanks, Teresa. Yeah.
I think I would probably add that sometimes there's a time and a place for the examined life, and sometimes there's a time and a place for knowing when you have the capacity and the reality of a situation to do that. So sometimes you know that you're consciously numbing out and you're just going to block these things out for a moment because you're doing life, you're doing family, you're doing children, whatever it might be. But you know that there will come a point when things are calmer and you have that space. But I would say there is, sometimes it can be a conscious choice to do it when you have the space and not force yourself to do it whilst you're amidst the chaos, because often you're on survival mode at that point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got to be gentle on yourself, and choose your moments. But, in that situation, the good thing is that you're at least conscious of the need to go there. You're choosing when to go, but you've already kind of made the biggest step, which is acknowledging the need to go there. And the challenge is with so many teams that they're not even at that place yet. And so again, it's down to us to start talking about it. Someone's got to start the conversation. We've got to model it, and that's hard, because what it means is that we have to be vulnerable. And there's a whole nother subject on vulnerability, and actually we'll touch on vulnerability on the part 2 as well, because that's huge. But again, we've there's an element of bravery, isn't there, with like, oh, I'm gonna have to talk about this. If I want other people to open up, I've got to open up first. I've got to create the safe space. And so again, coming back to your point, Margaret, from the beginning, if as a lead you're not awake and not, you've got poor leadership, that's going to be really hard, because no one wants to open up in front of a leader that's going to be toxic. Yeah.
I guess just to add to that, Phil, would be that, again, it would be a timing thing with the team when we raise these things as well. Because if you are amidst civil war and your goal that day is to get from A to B without being robbed, opening up and being asked to discuss trauma from the past or the emotional impact of that, it's not always possible for you to keep functioning, and the catastrophic fallout of you stopping functioning because is bigger. So it's all about timing, and very much I'd sort of really stress that when you're ready approach. So letting everyone know that these are the resources here, these are what we'd like to do with you when you're ready. And it's very much for them to take the lead on it, not for us as leaders to push upon them.
Yeah, totally agree with that. So I think maybe there's going to be a spectrum, isn't there, from high trauma, civil war, all of that, towards normality. So you got to choose your right time. You got to read the team. You know what the situation is. So today has been much more about, or I'd hoped to be about more of the kind of day-to-day stuff, rather than effectively trauma care, which is a whole different subject. So I wouldn't advocate going there in terms of probing questions with that, without training and support. But to start on yourself as an exam in life is a really good place to start. And hopefully with Harriet's contact, we can really look at how to navigate that space. That would be really good.
Wow, so much to think about. Thank you, Phil. Really stimulating as always. Very interesting. And I'm sure that we will all want to be part of part 2. And maybe, the trauma, I don't know if they can be wound into one, or whether they need to be separate sessions.
I think separate.
Separate. Harriet, you've got is that a hand up or a thumbs up?
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Excellent.
That was a thumbs up saying that I'm interested in the second session. The one about incompetent, 5 things of a bad team, or whatever it's called.
Five dysfunctions. Yeah. So Teresa, the part 2 is much more about how to grow a healthy team, and it's based on a really amazing guy called Patrick Lencioni, American guy, but very down to earth, very culturally good in terms of helping grow a healthy team. So his book is basically the basis of the next presentation that Lorna's already had. So her team's now very healthy. So yes, Claire, could do June, or I could do. I'm not traveling for quite a while now, so if you wanted that sooner rather than later, plus the trauma one, that would be great.
So we have something booked for the 17th of April, which is teaching at the right level, which will be very interesting. We also have one on May the 22nd, which is focusing on child sponsorship. So it's then kind of June, July type times, if you're around.
Yeah.
We can kind of pick a day now, if you've got your diary, as to what suits.
Right, June the 12th, would that be all right?
Good for me. Any thoughts from, I mean, is that too close to the other one? Does that matter to anybody?
No.
Good. Any objection to June the 12th? Going once? Going twice?
Okay.
Excellent. June the 12th.
Part 2.
Part 2.
And is that something that we advertise to the wider beings, or do we keep that as this group diving into part 2? Like, would it make sense for other people to come in? Do we want other people in to talk about those things?
Sorry, I was just saying it is advertised on the SICDN website, on Facebook for everybody, but it's also sent out as email to people in the education group. Is that right?
For everything else it is, but I mean, I could make a list of people that are here today if we do want to privatize part 2. That, I guess, is the question. Phil, would it make sense for people who may just join part 2? And does
so part 2 can be a standalone. You know, it's going to help.
And are there any objections in the group of safety-wise of feeling like you want to stay within this?
Yeah.
None from me.
Could people who want to join part 2 access this recording if they wanted to do some pre-work just to help it make more sense? As I'm happy, I'm shared a link. I will be happy for them to see.
Yeah, I mean, I can put it up for sure if everybody is okay with what's being shared as being open. If you don't want to say now, please feel free to message me privately or email.
Yeah. Great. And just, I guess, finally to say, you know, if today has triggered something, or you're thinking, right, I want to go there, you know, really think through someone who you can share with, that you can download with, you know, a safe pair of hands, and use this as a good kind of conversation start to say, hey, you know, I've just been on this session, we were talking about this, I've realized that actually I could really do with someone just to kind of talk stuff through with. Would you be up for that? Just, you know, you use it as a conversation starter, or you maybe already have got someone. Recommend it someone other than a spouse. Blurred boundaries and all that. Okay. Great. So listen, I just really want to thank you all for being here, for spending your valuable time here. You're doing an amazing work, all of you, and really hope that this has given you some food for thought. Remember, be gentle on yourselves. This takes time. All right, be patient. But I just really want to encourage you to enter into a more examined life. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you so much, Phil.